Alright, so this tutorial assumes that you have Lejos on your brick already, and it's running fine, but you have two motors, one in B and one in A and one in C, and that you have a USB to micro USB cord so that you can plug it inside the robot when you're ready to program. Alright, so the purpose of this video is to get you to run the first class of your EV3 Lejos code and to help you set up a project. So the assumption here is that the computer that you're working on is already set up for Lejos. You've done all that. This website that I have open right now is not mine. It's lejos.org's website, and it's specifically for the EV3. Because I'm looking at this website right here. Now, this has a wiki and a blog, some downloads to get you set up if you're not set up on your own computer, and an API. But the intended purpose for this is for those who are already all set up, so should be. Now, the API is going to be very useful for anybody trying to learn anything about programming these robots. In this particular code that we're about to use, we're actually using a couple classes. One in particular that I suggest you take a look at while you're going over the code later on is the EV3 large regulated motor. I use a couple methods from that class. I use a constructor and stuff to create a couple motors. So it kind of gives you an appreciation of what might be in there and what you might be able to do with it. So moving forward, we're going to go ahead and take this code, which is also linked in this video, and I'm going to copy all of this code from the Motor 1 class. My Eclipse is already open. Now EV3, I can't just create a new class in some package or project I already have. I have to use the Lejos setup functions here. So I'm going to go to File, New, Lejos EV3 project. Must be in this. So I create bots, let's say Lejos, and name doesn't really matter, but what does matter, oh, I messed that up. Okay, so what does matter is that your execution environment is CDC 1.0. Not going to get into the details of it, just make sure yours is set up like that. It'll save you a lot of headaches. So we'll go ahead and we'll click Finish. And now you'll see that I have a project folder here with the Lejos logo on it. So I'm going to right click on that, go to New, Class. The class I'm going to create is going to be called Motor 1. And I'll get this default code. Go ahead and delete that. Now we copied that code from the Google Doc, so I'm going to paste all that code. And it should be completely error-free. We're going to scoot up here, and I'm going to hit Control-Shift-F to format it and Control-S to save it. So when I look at this code, I'm not going to go over all of it because if you look down, it's pretty well documented throughout what it does. You should definitely take a look at it, try to figure it out, mess around with the code a little bit, see if you can get it to have some behaviors that you're hoping for and predicting. But something I will point out, it looks a lot like any other Java application you might make, a console application. It may or may not have some import statements. You've got a class name, Motor 1. I'm not extending anything or doing anything too fancy there. And then something that might look a little different or out of place to stuff you've seen before, I have some variables. I have an EV3 large regulated motor variable that I refer to as left motor. And most of you might be used to seeing variables in lowercase, or at least starting with lowercase, then going to camel case. In this particular case, left motor is a variable I don't ever want to change the value of, which is why I've made it a private, a static, and a final variable, because left motor is always going to be left motor. Now, earlier in the video, I told you to make sure that your motors are plugged into A and B. If you look, I call left motor with motor port A, and I call right motor with motor port C. I think the rest of the code is going to be pretty much straightforward for you. You'll notice that we have our main method, and we've got a while loop with a condition, and inside that while loop we have nested an if, else if, and else statement, and they all have their behaviors within there. Another thing that might be new to you though is this thread sleep. Now this is going to cause us to actually, when we press on a button to test it, to keep that button pressed down because it sleeps for 1 second. You can mess with this number after you've practiced the code and looked at it a little bit to see what behaviors happen if you make it shorter, like what happens if you make it 200, and then what if you make it 10,000. But for right now, leave it all set. And now in order to run a Lejos EV3 program, there's something you have to do. You have to look for this menu and look for Start EV3 Control. You need to search for a robot. Now this is if you have the Lejos robot turned on and it's plugged into your computer using the USB to micro USB cord. And then you'll see it's disconnected. So we will connect it. And then once it says it's connected, you'll see a list of files here. If you want to, you could delete them from here. It's kind of a handy little tool to have. And I'm going to minimize this for right now. Now, in order to actually run a code, you're going to go ahead and you can go to the Run button. It might ask you whether or not to be a Java application or a Lejos EV3 program. In this case, we want a Lejos EV3 program. We'll click OK. And then once you click that, if you take a look at the screen on your EV3, give it maybe another second or so, it will show an hourglass and it will say, wait a second. That's the program uploading, compiling and uploading onto your EV3 bot. And then you should see a message saying, waiting for a button to be pressed. All right. So if you press the right button and keep it pressed, your right motor will continue to rotate. If you let go of it, it stops. If you press on your left button, you'll hear the left motor is going to go a lot slower. Take a look at the code, you'll probably see why. And then when I let it go, it stops. If I touch the right button, the top button, and I keep it pressed, it'll say start button or button is 1. And then if I let go and press the bottom button and keep it pressed, it'll eventually say button is number 4. And then I'm going to go ahead and click the top left button, which is the escape button, and you'll see that the program will want to shut down. Now, I don't want to shut down the EV3, so I will click the X, and then it goes back to the menu. Take a look at this code. Take a look at the API. Mess around with it a little bit. Keep uploading the code. See what you can do with this first program. Next program, we'll go ahead and we'll take a look at using sensors and creating a little bit of logic behind them.